My lord, I know what you're thinking, but when I was young, I never needed anyone to tell me how lucky I was to have a special friend like you had with Polixenes. The two of you were inseparable almost from birth, and now he's the king of Bohemia, and you're the king of Sicily. Accusing him of making love to your Queen Hermione was insane. And then, just for fun, you ordered your trusted advisor Camillo to poison him. Too hot indeed. Do you understand that as a result of your actions, all the fun that you had with your son Mamilius is no more because he died of sadness when you accused your pregnant wife of adultery? The happy times you enjoyed with your family and friends, I'm afraid those days are gone. The oracle at Delphos that you requested told that Hermione was chaste, Polixenes blameless, Camillo a true subject, you, Leontes, a jealous tyrant, your innocent babe truly begotten, and that you shall live without an heir, if that which is lost be not found. Now will you admit that you were wrong? I don't know if you like the thought of living alone, but when I think of all the friends I've known, I'd feel terrible if every time I turned to them for help I'd find nobody's home. I'm sure you don't want to live like that for the rest of your life either. I know it's hard to be sure that this can get better, especially if sometimes you feel so insecure. But trust me, Leontes, listening to Paulina's advice, even when love seems so distant and obscure, doing penance by mourning for your wife and searching for that child which you left in the wilderness remains the cure. Do this, I tell thee, and keep saying to yourself, I don't want to be all by myself anymore. In the 2019 Kendrick Brother film Overcomer, a father abandons his infant daughter, and she's later told that he is dead. Through highly unusual circumstances, though, she discovers that he's actually alive and living close by, and the two of them meet years later. And he coaches her to become a high school track running state champion. In The Winter's Tale, a king abandons his infant daughter, and after 16 years, through highly unusual circumstances, he is reunited with her once again. As you can see, this story is timeless, so let's take a look at the plot. The play begins with Polixenes, the king of Bohemia, who has been visiting his lifelong friend Leontes, who is the king of Sicilia. After enjoying 9 months of catching up with his old friend, Polixenes longs to return to his own kingdom to tend to the affairs of Bohemia and see his son. Since Leontes cannot persuade Polixenes to stay longer, he asks his wife, Queen Hermione, to try to convince him. Hermione agrees, and after much persuasion, she is successful. Leontes is surprised that Hermione could convince Polixenes when he could not, and starts to suspect that his pregnant wife has been having an affair with Polixenes. Leontes orders Camillo, his Sicilian lord and advisor, to poison Polixenes, but instead, Camillo warns Polixenes and the two of them flee to Bohemia. Leontes becomes furious over their escape and publicly accuses Hermione of adultery, declaring that the child she is bearing must be Polixenes. Leontes imprisons his wife over the adamant protest of his nobles and sends 2 of his lords to the oracle at Delphos to prove that he was right about the affair. Meanwhile, the queen gives birth to a girl while in prison, and her loyal friend Paulina takes the baby to the king, thinking that the sight of the child will soften his heart. But Leontes grows angrier, ordering Paulina's husband, Lord Antigonus, to take the child and abandon it in a desolate place. When the 2 lords return from Delphos with the word of the oracle, Hermione is put on trial and asserts her innocence. the oracle states unconditionally that Hermione and Polixenes are innocent, that Camillo is an honest man, and that Leontes is a jealous tyrant who will have no heir until that which is lost is found. Leontes refuses to believe the oracle, but soon learns that his son Mamilius is dead after hearing the king's accusations against the boy's mother. At this, Hermione faints dead away and is taken off stage by Paulina, who later tells the king that she is dead, at which her now heartbroken and repentant husband, Leontes, vows to spend the rest of his life atoning for the loss of his son Mamilius, his abandoned daughter, and his wife. Meanwhile, Antigonus abandons the infant on the seacoast of Bohemia, saying that Queen Hermione appeared to him in a dream and told him to name the girl Perdita. He leaves the babe and a fardel, which is a bundle, containing gold and other trinkets, which suggests that the infant is of noble blood. A violent storm suddenly appears, wrecking the ship on which Antigonus arrived. As he is taking pity on the child, he is chased away in one of Shakespeare's most famous stage directions, Exit Pursued by a Bear. Perdita is rescued by an old shepherd and his son, known as Clown. At the beginning of Act 4, the personage of Time appears as a chorus, saying that 16 years have now passed. Camillo, who is in Bohemia working for Polixenes, begs the king to allow him to return to Sicilia, but Polixenes refuses and reports to Camillo that his son, Prince Florizel, has fallen in love with a lowly shepherd girl named Perdita. The two men disguise themselves and attend the sheep-shearing feast to observe Florizel and Perdita. At the feast, hosted by the old shepherd, who has prospered thanks to the gold in the fardel, the peddler Autolycus picks the clown's pocket, entertains the guests with bawdy songs, and sells them trinkets. Polixenes and Camillo, still disguised, watches Florizel, pretending to be a shepherd named Doricles, and Perdita are betrothed. Polixenes rips off his disguise and stops them, threatening the old man and his daughter with torture and death, and ordering Florizel never to see Perdita again. Camillo, still longing to return to Sicilia, schemes to send Florizel and Perdita there so that Polixenes will take him with him when he pursues them. The lovers board a ship for Sicilia, along with the two shepherds and Autolycus. Meanwhile, in Sicilia, Leontes is still mourning. The lords plead with him to end his time of repentance because the kingdom needs an heir. Paulina, however, convinces the king to remain unmarried forever, since no woman can match the greatness of his lost Hermione. Prince Florizel and Perdita arrive in Sicilia, pretending to be married, and are welcomed by a joyful Leontes. The prince pretends to be on a diplomatic mission from his father, but his plans are foiled when Polixenes and Camillo too unexpectedly arrive in Sicilia. The kings meet and reconcile, and the old shepherd tells the Sicilian court about how he found and raised Perdita, the shipwreck, and how Antigonus met his end. Leontes is overjoyed about being reunited with his daughter and begs Polixenes to forgive him. The old shepherd and the young shepherd are rewarded and made gentlemen by the kings. Leontes, Polixenes, Camillo, Florizel, Perdita, and the lords all go to Paulina's house, where a recently finished statue of Hermione is revealed. The sight of his wife's image shocks Leontes because she looks exactly as she would now were she still alive. But then, to everyone's amazement, the statue begins to move and speak. It turns out that it's not a statue at all, but Hermione, who has been living in seclusion with Paulina for the last 16 years, waiting for her daughter to be found. As the play ends, Perdita and Florizel become engaged, the whole company celebrates the miracle, and the king rewards Paulina by giving her the good Camillo to be her husband. When we return, we'll look at some of the remarkable characters in The Winter's Tale. All right, now let's take a look at some of the major characters in The Winter's Tale. We'll start with the kings. King Polixenes of Bohemia has been visiting his lifelong best friend, Leontes, who is the king of Sicily, for the past 9 months. Leontes begs his pregnant wife, Hermione, to convince Polixenes to stay a week longer in Sicily. However, when she is successful, her husband becomes consumed with jealousy and accuses her of having an affair and being pregnant by his best friend. Camillo is Leontes' trusted advisor, who the king orders to poison Polixenes, but instead of doing so, alerts Polixenes of the plot, and the two of them escape to Bohemia. Mamillius is Leontes and Hermione's young son, who dies of sadness due to his father's slanderous actions against his mother. Paulina is a noblewoman and the wife of Antigonus. She courageously stands up and defends Hermione against Leontes, and Antigonus is ordered to take Hermione's newborn baby girl and leave it to die in the wilderness. Oh, by the way, he gets eaten by a bear for his troubles. And an old shepherd and his son Clown find Hermione's baby girl named Perdita and raise her as their own. When she is 16, Perdita meets and falls in love with Florizel, the son of Polixenes, but they are forbidden to marry by his father, the king. Coming up, we'll look at some of the plot devices and memorable scenes from The Winter's Tale. One of the reasons why The Winter's Tale is so popular is because it uses so many classic plot devices. Once again, we see the dead trick. This is when one character mistakenly believes that another character is dead, when in fact he or she is alive. In this case, Paulina keeps Hermione out of sight for 16 years to give Leontes time to mourn his queen and for his heir to be found. By the way, when it comes to memorable scenes, you'll be hard-pressed to find one more memorable than Act 5, Scene 3, when Hermione's statue comes to life. Of course, another great plot device is the tried and true shipwreck. This takes place offstage and is described to the audience by Clown, as he simultaneously tells his father about it and also that Antigonus has just been eaten by a bear. Another memorable scene takes place in Act 3, Scene 2, where we have the fearless Hermione trotted out to go on trial. Here's how she responds after Leontes tells her that she must die. "Sir, spare your threats. The bug which you would fright me with I seek. To me can life be no commodity? The crown and comfort of my life, your favor, I do give lost, for I do feel it gone, but know not how it went. My second joy and the first fruits of my body, from his presence I am barred like one infectious. My third comfort starred, most unluckily, is from my breast the innocent milk in its most innocent mouth haled out to murder. Myself on every post proclaimed a strumpet, with immodest hatred by the childbed privilege denied, which belongs to women of all fashion. Lastly, hurried here to this place in the open air before I have got strength of limit. Now, my liege, tell me what blessing I have here alive, that I should fear to die. Therefore proceed. But yet hear this, mistake me not. No life, I prize it not a straw, but for mine honor, which I would free, if I shall be condemned upon surmises, all proofs sleeping else, but what your jealousies awake, I tell you 'tis rigor and not law. You honors all, I do refer me to the oracle. Apollo, be my judge. And we'll finish up with one more plot device which follows Hermione's speech, and that is the prophecy. In this case, the oracle at Delphos delivers the news that the king shall live without an heir if that which is lost be not found. This prophecy is pretty foreboding if you think about it, because at the time it's read, the king's son Mamillius is still thought to be alive. When we get back, we'll look at some of the themes that run through this play. It would be difficult to discuss The Winter's Tale without mentioning the theme of jealousy. But unlike in Othello, Leontes doesn't need an evil Iago to make him mistrust his wife's fidelity. He does it all on his own. Listen to how he works himself into a frenzy right after he specifically asked his wife to try to get Polixenes to stay a week longer. This is Act 1, Scene 2. Too hot, to mingle friendship far as mingling bloods. I have tremor cordis on me, my heart dances, but not for joy, not joy. This entertainment may a free face put on, derive a liberty from heartiness, from bounty, fertile bosom, and welcome the agent, may I grant, but to be paddling palms and pinching fingers as now they are, and making practised smiles as in a looking-glass, and then to sigh as 'twere the more to the dear. Oh, that is entertainment my bosom likes not, nor my brows, meaning he feels that he's been cuckolded and has horns in his brows. Camillo, as the oracle confirms, is a true subject. He understands that his role is to perform the duty of the king. However, he doesn't just go along following blindly, just taking orders. Once the king orders him to poison Polixenes and wrong his virtuous queen, he breaks with his duty to the king and remains loyal to what is right. In this case, he warns Polixenes about the plot against his life, and the two leave together for Bohemia. Although both Camillo and Paulina are both very honorable characters in this play, there is a vast difference between the two, and that comes down to fearlessness. While Camillo does the right thing by informing Polixenes about Leontes' jealousy and the plot on his life, he will not stand up and confront his king, but instead flees the country, leaving the queen to fend for herself. However, Paulina, even more so than Hermione, is indeed Shakespeare's most fearless creation. She is absolutely loyal to the queen, and she's not afraid to stand up to anyone, be it her husband, the Sicilian court, or especially King Leontes himself. She barges into the king's chamber at night to let him know that the queen has delivered him an infant daughter. And despite Leontes' tirade and threats on her life, she doesn't back down 1 inch from him. He says, "I'll have thee burned." She says, "I care not. It is an heretic that makes the fire, not she which burns in it. I'll not call you tyrant, but this most cruel usage of your queen, not able to produce more accusation than your own weak-hinged fancy, something savours of tyranny, and will ignoble make you, yea, scandalous to the world." This woman is totally fearless. She will withstand the wrath of the king, not only opposing his actions, but aggressively taunting him and rebuking him for his actions, like Emilia does to Othello when she confronts him after Desdemona's death. This is a step far beyond courage, demonstrating total disregard for her consequences, but they're not reckless actions. They are driven on because she knows Hermione is innocent and Leontes needs to recognize that he's wronged her. And then we'll hear from her a little while later in Act 3, Scene 2, delivering her most scathing speech and calling out Leontes for his tyrannical acts of jealousy, telling him that Hermione, his queen, is dead. "What studied torments, tyrant, hast for me? What wheels, racks, fires, what flaying, boiling, in leads or oils? What old or newer torture must I receive, whose every word deserves to taste of thy most worst? Thy tyranny, together working with thy jealousies, fancies too weak for boys, too green for idle girls of 9. Oh, think what they have done, and then run mad indeed, stark mad. For all thy bygone fooleries were but spices of it. That thou betrayest Polixenes, 'twas nothing. That did but show thee of a fool, inconstant and damnable, ingrateful, nor was it much. But thou wouldst have poisoned good Camillo's honor to have him kill a king. Poor trespasses, more monstrous standing by. Whereof I reckon the casting forth to crows thy baby daughter to be or none or little, though a devil would have shed water out of fire ere he done it. Nor is it directly laid to thee, the death of the young prince, whose honorable thoughts high for one so tender, cleft the heart that could conceive a gross and foolish sire, blemished his gracious dam. This is not, no, laid to thy answer, but the last. O lords, when I have said, cry woe, the queen, the sweetest, dearest creature's dead, and vengeance for it not dropped down yet. There's no question that both Camillo and Paulina are honorable and loyal characters, but when it comes to fearlessness, Paulina wins hands down. Let us hope that when they eventually marry, Camillo is inspired by his admirable wife's courage to stand up even more strongly for what's right, even if it's against a king. A lot of the most powerful lines in The Winter's Tale have been included in some of the other tracks in this episode. But there's an additional speech in Act 1, Scene 2, where Leontes is growing even deeper in jealousy about Hermione and Polixenes. He uses some fishing references in describing his tortured mind. I am angling now, though you perceive me not how I give line. Go to, how she holds up the neb, the bill to him, and arms her with the boldness of a wife to her allowing husband. Gone already? Inch thick, knee deep, o'er head and ears a forked one. Go play, boy, play. Thy mother plays and I play too, but so disgraced a part, whose issue will hiss me to my grave, contempt and clamor will be my knell. Go play, boy, play. There have been, or I am much deceived, cuckolds ere now, and many a man there is, even at this present, now while I speak, holds his wife by the arm, that little thinks she has been sluiced in his absence, and his pond fished, by his next neighbor, by Sir Smile his neighbor. Nay, there's comfort in it, whilst other men have gates, and those gates open, as mine, against their will. Should all despair that have revolted wives, the 10th of mankind would hang themselves. Physic for't, there is none. It is a bawdy planet that will strike where 'tis dominant, and 'tis powerful, think it, from east, west, north, and south. Be it concluded, no barricado for a belly, know it. It will let in and out the enemy. With bag and baggage, many thousand ons have the disease, and feel it not. And I love that when Leontes is rebuking Antigonus for not being able to control his wife Paulina, Antigonus replies, hang all the husbands that cannot do that feat, you'll leave yourself hardly one subject. It reminds me of Pompey Bum's reply to Lord Aeschylus when he's told that fornication will be punishable by beheadings and hangings in measure for measure. He says, if you head and hang all that offend that way, but for 10 years together, you'll be glad to give out a commission for more heads. I also want to include a short passage that Polixenes uses when he responds to Leontes' question about his son Florizel in Act 1, Scene 2. Leontes asks, my brother, are you so fond of your young prince as we do seem to be of ours? And Polixenes says, if at home, sir, he's all my exercise, my mirth, my matter, now my sworn friend, and then mine enemy, by parasite, by soldier, statesman, all. He makes a July's day short as December, and with his varying childness, cures me in thoughts that would thick my blood. It's a very touching response that we don't normally see in many other Shakespeare plays. In fact, it's almost in direct opposition to how Henry IV spoke about his son Hal before he matured into Henry V. When we return, we'll look at some of the major turning points and correlations to the other Shakespeare plays. All right, now let's take a look at some of the major turning points and correlations to the other Shakespeare plays in The Winter's Tale. The most obvious turning point in the play is when Leontes, instead of being grateful that his wife has convinced his best friend to stay a week longer, becomes consumed with jealousy and suspicion about their infidelity. Had he just been grateful, his son would still be alive, and Antigonus wouldn't have gotten eaten by a bear. While we've seen jealousy in other Shakespeare plays and other characters like Othello in Othello, Posthumus in Cymbeline, and Claudio in Much Ado About Nothing, those characters all had villains maliciously working against them to spur on their jealousy, whereas Leontes just invents the entire infidelity in his mind. Even Master Ford in The Merry Wives of Windsor had Corporal Nin initially plant the idea of jealousy in his mind. Hermione's trial scene, where the oracle is read the prince dies and Hermione is thought to be dead is not only a major turning point because that's when Leontes realized that he's been wrong, it's also a very similar scene to Catherine of Aragon's trial scene in Henry VIII. Once again, we see a disapproving father in Polixenes who doesn't want his son to marry a low-born shepherdess. We've seen this theme again in Othello, Cymbeline, The Merry Wives of Windsor, A Midsummer Night's Dream, The Merchant of Venice, Troilus and Cressida, Timon of Athens, and Two Gentlemen of Verona. Luckily for Florizel, Perdita turned out to be the daughter of a king. Leontes mourning the loss of his wife is similar to Aegeon in A Comedy of Errors and Pericles in Pericles, Prince of Tyre. Also, Leontes cannot sleep after contemplating his actions, like Macbeth, Henry IV, and Richard III. In both The Winter's Tale and Pericles, Prince of Tyre, we see passages of long periods of time, 16 and 14 years respectively. In The Winter's Tale, Cymbeline, and Pericles, Prince of Tyre, we have children of noble birth who were left for many years and only discover their birthrights upon being reunited as adults. And of course, Leontes witnessing Hermione's statue come to life is also a major turning point in this play. And it's fitting that Shakespeare should have the noble Paulina be fitted with a worthy husband in Camillo. And we'll finish off this section with one more memorable scene when Florizel tells Perdita how much he loves her in Act 4, Scene 4. Thou dearest Perdita, with these forced thoughts, I pray thee darken not the mirth of the feast, or I'll be thine, my fair, or not my father's, for I cannot be mine own, nor anything to any, if I be not thine. To this I am most constant, though destiny say no. Be merry, gentle, strange such thoughts as these with anything that you behold the while. Your guests are coming. Lift up your countenance, as it were the day of celebration of that nuptial which we two have sworn shall come. It's easy to imagine that this profession of love could have been included in Romeo's speech to Juliet. When we get back, we'll look at some interesting facts about The Winter's Tale. In preparing to do this episode, I came across some interesting facts I want to share with you. The original source work was Robert Greene's prose romance Pandosto, published in 1588, but the passage of 16 years in Act 4 was a Shakespearean invention. The oracle at Delphos states at the end that the king shall live without an heir if that which is lost be not found. Perdita's name, in fact, does mean that which is lost. By the way, Florizel means flowers and harvest, and clown means a bumpkin or a guy from the country. Incidentally, Paulina's name is derived from St. Paul, who spoke truth, and Autolycus, the peddler and thief, means wolf-like, in other words, a predator. In The Winter's Tale, Leontes loses his young son, Mamillius. Shakespeare also lost his 11-year-old son named Hamnet in 1596. Bohemia is given a seacoast where Perdita is left, the ship dropping her off is wrecked, and from which Florizel, Perdita, her brother and father leave to go to Sicilia. Bohemia was located where our current-day Czech Republic is. However, there is no Bohemian seacoast. So what happened to it? One explanation is that for a brief period in the 13th century, territories ruled by Ottokar II of Bohemia did stretch to the Adriatic Sea. In addition, in 1891, Edmund Oscar von Lippmann pointed out that Bohemia was also a rare name for Apollina in southern Italy. As Andrew Garr puts it, Bohemia may have been given a seacoast to flout geographical realism and to underline the unreality of the place in the play. Still, here's another take. A Winter's Tale is something associated with parents telling children stories of legends around the fireside. By using this title, it implies to the audience that the details should not be taken too seriously. And finally, in 1986, William Shatner did a Saturday Night Live skit in which he famously tells a bunch of diehard fans obsessed with trivia questions at a Star Trek convention, "It's just a TV show." Some of the reasons The Winter's Tale is considered a problem play are because there is a passage of 16 years. Paulina is absent twice or thrice a day, but in all that time, no one bothers to see what she's doing. An old shepherd has a son named Clown, who simultaneously witnesses a crew sinking in a shipwreck and Antigonus being eaten by a bear, but makes sure he introduces himself by name and social status while his shoulder bone is being torn out. By the way, this is the only Shakespeare play that contains the stage direction, "Exit pursued by a bear." So for all of you aficionados who might be looking a bit too deeply for resolutions to these problems, I'll paraphrase William Shatner, because when it comes to William Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale, remember folks, it's just a play. All right, now let's take a look at the actors that played in the 1981 BBC Shakespeare version of The Winter's Tale. John Welsh, who plays Archidamus, played Flavius in Timon of Athens in 1981. Marilena Kendall, who plays Amelia, also played Andromache in Troilus and Cressida in 1981, and Lainey Bona in Henry VI Part 3 in 1983. John Benfield, who plays the jailer, also played multiple bit parts in Henry VI Parts 1, 2, and 3 in 1983, as well as 2 small roles in Titus Andronicus in 1985. Cornelius Garrett, who plays a servant to Leontes, also played a prisoner in Timon of Athens the same year, and the Earl of Northumberland in Henry VI Part 3. John Curlis, who plays Cleomenes, also played Lord Fitzwater in Richard II in 1978. George Howe, who plays Paulina Stewart, also played Sir Thomas Erpingham in Henry V in 1979, Euphoronius in Antony and Cleopatra in 1981, and the Doctor in King Lear in 1982. David Burke, who plays Camillo, played the Duke of Gloucester in Henry VI Parts 1 and 2, and the second one he also played Dick the Butcher, both in 1983, and plays Sir William Catesby in Richard III in 1983. Anne Calder Marshall, who plays Hermione, also played Lavinia in Titus Andronicus in 1985. Jeremy Kemp, who plays Leontes, also played the Duke of Norfolk in Henry VIII in 1979. Arthur Hewlett, who plays the Old Shepherd, played Adam in As You Like It in 1978, and the Priest in Twelfth Night in 1980. Jeremy Dimmock, who plays Mamilius, also played the young Duke of York in Richard III in 1983. Peter Benson, who plays the clown servant, played the second gravedigger in Hamlet in 1980, and played Henry VI in Henry VI Parts 1, 2, 3, and Richard III, all in 1983. And finally, Paul Fesson, who plays Clown, also played Cloten in Cymbeline in 1982, the first citizen in Coriolanus in 1984, Costard in Love's Labour's Lost in 1985, as well as multiple roles including the Duke of Clarence in Henry VI Parts 1, 2, 3, and Richard III, all in 1983. That means that he's appeared in 7 different BBC Shakespeare plays, by my count, more than any other actor in the entire series. Now stay tuned for today's trivia challenge, which is called Ladies of the Evening. All right, today's trivia challenge is called Ladies of the Evening. Name the plays in which these madams or prostitutes appear or are mentioned. Number 1, Timandra and Phrynia. Number 2, Mistress Overdone and Kate Keepdown. And number 3, Doll Tearsheet. When we return, I'll have the answers for you, along with some relevant lessons from The Winter's Tale. Okay, now let's see how you did in today's trivia challenge called Ladies of the Evening. You were to name the plays in which these madams or prostitutes either appear or are mentioned. Number 1 was Timandra and Phrynia. That was Timon of Athens. Number 2 was Mistress Overdone and Kate Keepdown. That was Measure for Measure. And number 3, Dal Tearsheet. That was from Henry IV, Part 2. Now, let's take a look at some relevant lessons from The Winter's Tale. First, avoid jealousy and jumping to conclusions without any real proof. I challenge you to trust people to the degree in which they continuously re-earn your trust. Second, remember that integrity is not conditional. Camillo stayed with Leontes until his actions became bloody and insane. He then turned to Polixenes and followed him loyally until his actions became terribly unfair to his son. In both situations, he acted with integrity and allowed his commitment to doing the right thing to overrule who he served. And finally, strive to have the courage and fearlessness of Paulina. That means that you need to have the courage of your convictions and not waver just because the truth may be dangerous to admit. Remember that there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. I'm Dave Romeo, and thank you for watching this episode of Romeo and Shakespeare. Please join me next time for the beginning of Season 2, when a usurped king and his men live like Robin Hoods, after he and his daughter both escape into the woods.